why you should feel hopeful about what's happening right now. With Biden in office, big tech and cancel culture shutting down patriots like Mike Lindell, and our freedoms being suppressed at nearly every turn, you might be feeling hopeless. Despite these events, behind the scenes, something amazing is happening that should prove to you good things are indeed on the horizon. Today, we're going to review 8 stories that will give you hope about freedom and justice. Welcome to Where's the Hope News, where we bring light to the darkness. I'm Justin Deschamps, founder of Stillness in the Storm, and let me just take a second to tell you about this project. I cover a lot of news stories, and I've been in this business of trying to figure out what the heck is going on in our world for a long time. In my estimation, there's always a hopeful perspective to consider, because we as children of God have an incredible gift. Our minds, our free will, our ability to create trust with each other. With that in hand, literally nothing can stop us. Before we get started, please go to stillnessinthestorm.com to support our work. We need your support to fulfill our mission. Become a subscriber for as little as the price of a cup of coffee or a meal. You can also support us by making purchases from our partners at Ascent Nutrition and EMF Harmonized. For our first story, we have Patriots and Christians rally to support Mike Lindell despite woke companies pulling MyPillow products. After Mike Lindell came out to support Trump when Trump was pursuing his claims of election fraud that I'm sure everybody's quite familiar with at this point, companies in lockstep with the woke left cancel culture agenda have taken steps to remove MyPillow products from their stores. I just have to pause here and comment, I think it's really almost comical that there's so many people who feel so fight the power about all these things in our world right now, and this activist sentiment that they seem to feel is literally like reading a series of bullet points from these giant mega corporations. When did being an activist and being supported by mega corporations suddenly become synonymous? I don't know, I'll let you figure that one out. The retailers that have decided to strip MyPillow products from their store shelves are, to name a few, Kohl's, Bed Bath Beyond. Lindell's the producer of the film Absolute Proof, which shows, as the title suggests, sweeping evidence of voter fraud that implicates big tech agencies, politicians, and foreign actors like China. And he isn't scared. Now, if he can feel hopeful, given the fact that he's had his reputation smeared, his products have been pulled by big box stores, don't you think that maybe we can feel hopeful too? In an exclusive interview with Epoch Times released on Tuesday of last week, Mike Lindell said, quote, "We've actually increased in sales. We're actually up in sales. Our shipping's behind." He told the news agency in the interview, remember what happened to the CEO of Goya, who made pro-Trump statements. He also had big tech activists like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez coming out and saying that people should boycott his products. And what happened? They were flying off the shelves. So instead of these businesses being destroyed, they've actually exploded. Now keep in mind, this is alongside these so-called woke organizations that are getting woke and then going broke. This is good news. When we see open lies, manipulation, propaganda, and all sorts of machinations happening on the part of the deep state, and the response is not for people to just drink it up happily, but to be like, wait a minute, I don't know if I want to have anything to do with this, then you should feel some hope in your heart, because it means that people, by and large, the common sense component of people, despite education's attempts to destroy critical thinking and the ability to truly assess what's happening in our world, people by and large don't like when they're being manipulated. And that is a good thing, because basically all the deep state and all the cabal have is manipulation to work with. So this should prove to you, freedom-loving people are forced to be reckoned with. As an Australian once told me, 100 Americans are like 1,000 regular people when properly pissed off. And we're pissed. The media would have you believe that Trump supporters are white supremacist bigots and racists. The truth is, we're hardworking, truth-centric people who support freedom, the rule of law, and want a fair society. Patriots don't like bullies in the media. We didn't like bullies back in the American Revolution. We didn't like them during the Civil War. And we certainly don't like them now in the media, in big tech, or in our government. These are the same bullies who tell us how inclusive they are, using their power and influence to hurt, censor, and dox patriotic Americans. Story number 2, election fraud cases are moving forward to the Supreme Court. According to a February 6 Epoch Times article, the U.S. Supreme Court on February 5th scheduled several high-profile contested election lawsuits, including ones brought by attorneys Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood and the Trump campaign, for consideration at its February 19th conference. According to the case listing, the lawsuits include Powell's Michigan case, the Trump campaign's Pennsylvania lawsuit and Wisconsin lawsuit, the Pennsylvania lawsuit brought by Pennsylvania Rep. Mike Kelly, and Wood's Georgia case. Now, I want to make it clear, the Supreme Court failed the American people in a big way prior to the inauguration. They didn't hear cases of election fraud. In my understanding, and a lot of people would agree with this, the Supreme Court is supposed to act to overturn these decisions, especially when justice and the rule of law within our country is being threatened. The fact that Justice Roberts and any of these other justices that basically let the fraud go unchecked and unaddressed is pretty damning indictment if you know how to read the writing on the wall. Does that mean we should expect to see some massive sweeping shift in what happens as a result of these cases? I don't really know. Part of me believes we probably won't see the overturning of the election or anything like that, but keep in mind that there's evidence on the table right now that gives them the ability to act if they wanted. So we could see a situation where something could happen. Could. But given historical precedent, let's be honest with ourselves here. Is it likely? Probably not. The good news is these cases are going to be brought forward, and in the process of these cases bringing forward, that story, the idea that election fraud was real and it happened, can continue to percolate into the minds of the American people. Story number 3, Georgians fight to restore voter integrity, activating patriots at the local level. The Georgia GOP produced a package of proposals through their task force and executive committee that, quote, covers a range of topics from voter list management, absentee by mail voting, in-person voting, transparency in vote counting, participation by non-government entities, and other changes to ensure that ballots are cast and counted uniformly throughout Georgia's 159 counties. That's a statement read directly out of this document, which I'm going to put in the description if you want to look at it. Now, before I comment on the proposal and action plan, let me share that I was told about this through my local church during a class about the Constitution. I was told by the man who presented the information, who was just a regular guy. He goes to my church and we talk. We learned about a bunch of awesome things in this Constitution class. Now, he was told, and he's heard through his networks, and this was supported by a podcast that we subsequently saw that night, that the Christian base in the United States has been seriously activated. Now, not all churches are activating Christians and telling them to do the right thing and fight for their rights and ensure that corrupt actions don't get pushed forward, but a huge population of them are. And a lot of this involves local action. People are actually getting involved at the local level to act to undermine corrupted officialdom at the local and state and county level. Now, this is really important. Part of the way that the control system works is that they invade these positions of power because the current system of control, we might say, that is used is one where we believe that we have power, but then they take over these positions of officialdom, these offices that should be lawful if they were being used properly. You get people who break their own oaths and violate the laws of the land and the spirit of what it means to be a constitutional republic. So if people, we the people, start to move into those positions, then we're going to have a lot more of teeth to undermine these machinations of the cabal forces. Given that, people have been activated. If it wasn't for the fraud that we saw in the 2020 election, millions of patriotic Americans and people in the world, mind you, would have no idea what's going on. Also bear in mind what happened in Myanmar, that the military effectively had a lawful coup to undermine and remove a deep state elected official who was tied to the Clintons and Barack Obama, by the way, and the son of George Soros. Now, Mike Lindell put it really beautifully, and I really think this is accurate for the way we should be considering this. At a spiritual level, at the substance of our reality level, we have this situation which is actually a blessing. For a spiritual philosopher like myself, I realized a long time ago, and you can realize this for yourself, that when bad things happen in your life, it's actually an opportunity to face them, gain courage, and then through that, you'll have plenty of opportunity to take action in good things in the world. I think this is what Jesus meant by the idea that those who think of themselves as spiritually accomplished won't hunger for spiritual knowledge, but those who believe that they have a lot to learn will constantly fill their cup and they'll experience the riches of spirit right here and now. You don't have to wait. And so I think this is what this means, is that if we face this corruption properly, then we will better empower ourselves to see what the problem is so we can do something to stop it. Do I feel that these proposals put forth by the GOP are really going to have any benefit to us? Are really going to get us anywhere? Well, I can't say with certainty, but I will say that the GOP has proven itself to be a corrupt organization, and we cannot let their breach of trust and dishonor of our rights as Americans go unchecked. Until our faith can be restored by a proper reconciliation of their crimes and negligence, citizens must learn the law and must form their own action committees. Now, that doesn't mean we should work against them necessarily. It doesn't mean that we should just sit around and do nothing or completely avoid interacting with them at all. I would argue that we have to get out there and interact with literally everything that we can, including all sorts of organizations that we might label as bad, because we need to know what's going on. We need to be figuring out what they're offering us and be using a critical eye to discern. And one of the things I like to say is, to a well-trained mind, disinformation is key information. We need to identify the recipes of evil, the logic of a criminal mind. And that way we can see at a substance level where this corruption is coming from. So corruption is a thought process. It's a behavior set. It's mens rea and actus reus, a guilty mind and guilty act. And we need to understand it at that level, which means we need to go into these organizations and we need to get our hands dirty and we need to see what's happening. And I think that's why participating in something like this is good. One, because if everything goes well, then maybe they will get something done. But two, if they don't, then we'll be there to know what happened and why it went wrong and what we can do about it. Now, the deep state knows that they can take the teeth out of indignant patriots by corrupt organizations like the DNC and the GOP. Recall Republican U.S. congressmen and women who vowed to fight voter fraud on the 6th of January before the inauguration and turned coat after the Capitol stunt pulled by Antifa and DS actors. The total disgrace of Kelly Loeffler on that day should burn into everybody's mind that these people are either negligent and defunct or willfully complicit in undermining the spirit of the constitutional republic that the founders created. The good news about this story is, again, that patriots are being activated. But we cannot place our faith into unclean hands who have not restored our trust. One of the tenets of a contract, which I'm going to reveal to you at some point, are the tenets of what makes a truly honorable contract. And once you have that in place, once you have the understanding of a contract in place, your ability to identify corruption everywhere in your life will help us greatly, will help you and the world greatly. The fourth story is Facebook rival MeWe gains 2.5 million members in 1 week as users seek fewer privacy restrictions. Good news here is that people are starting to really understand how corrupt these big tech organizations are. These places like Facebook, Google, and Twitter. They're really starting to comprehend just how bad the situation has gotten, and they want to start protecting their privacy, which they should, because if you read what was in the terms of service in a lot of these social media companies, you'd be shocked. If people understood where money actually comes from and how that underlying lawful process is fleshed out with respect to the way we use our rights, then you'd see what's happening on big tech is one of the biggest operations to defraud the people from their lawful rights to gain wealth and resources. So getting onto valid platforms where we can interact with each other in a way that protects our property and our rights is huge, especially our privacy. 5, Mike Lindell says to Bannon War Room that the Absolute Truth film was seen by 10 million people within the first weekend, and 5 million of those actually finished watching the movie. Which, if you know anything about like video statistics, like, you know, I look at my own video statistics, most videos are not watched to completion. The really good completion rate is like 30 to 40%. He's got 50%. That should show you how powerful this documentary was. And I saw it, it was breathtaking. Now, to really put this in context for you, last year in 2020, Bad Boys for Life was the #1 box office movie and had 22.3 million box office ticket sales. Now, that's over the course of however long the movie was out for. It might have been, you know, a couple weeks, probably like a couple months, right? Now, a massive big budget Hollywood movie had only a little bit more than double the viewership that Mike Lindell had in 1 weekend of this movie. What does that prove to us? It proves to us that people want to know about the fraud. It's not that Biden took office and people are just like, oh, well, I'm just going to throw myself off a cliff because Trump isn't in office anymore. And, you know, it seems like everything's lost. No, instead of people running off the battlefield, like everything's lost, although believing that some people, the American spirit has been rekindled. People want justice and people are willing to do something to get it. And that, my friends, is something really hopeful. Number 6, Governor Stitt signs executive order to protect Oklahoma energy from federal outreach. The governor's executive order 2021-03 makes clear that when Biden's executive orders threaten to undermine Oklahoma energy production, his administration will fight to protect these industries. Now, you might be wondering how exactly. Well, this protection, well, the order doesn't specifically state, I had a look at it, but the language suggests that some type of legal action will take place. Usually the way these things tend to work is when there's a conflict of order, there's some type of legal back and forth that happens where states try to assert their rights. This is a situation where the federal government is trying to encroach in states' rights. He specifically mentions amendments in the Constitution that deal with the autonomy of the states with respect to the way they manage their own businesses. And this is literally a constitutional issue. So the fact that Biden has pushed so many executive orders, some of which literally try to completely undermine state sovereignty, is again a massive issue with the Constitution, which has been around for a long time, mind you. The massive assault happened on the Constitution in the early part of the 20th century, especially when the Federal Reserve was being enacted. So this situation is A, proving to us that we actually do have governors that are willing to fight for the rights of the people in their states, and B, that the Constitution and the state of our nation's civil policy has been corrupt for a very long time, guys. We have a lot of work to do. And a lot of the work, I would argue, is getting people to the point of awareness that there's an actual problem. We got to stop eating these deep state sandwiches that are, filled with maggots and things, and realizing that there's a lot better food out there if we just work together to try to procure it. But first, we have to identify that there's a problem. For our last story, we have Trump's acquittal. Now, last week there was the impeachment hearing. It was a big national story, although the deep state media did their best to try to cover up all the developments that were happening. But if you saw any of those clips, which by the way, we're going to put out a lot of that information in this week's Where's the Hope newsletter, which you can find on Stillness in a Storm, I'm going to cover just a few pieces of that. The biggest development wasn't Trump's acquittal, I would argue. The biggest development was the process itself and the depths of corruption that the deep state was willing to go to try to get Trump convicted. And that they basically admitted it. What is it that they basically admitted? That they were caught fabricating evidence. Now, we don't have confessions that they were caught fabricating evidence, but Trump's defense team did find fabrications of evidence. They manipulated a tweet and they cut up video to try to make it seem like Trump was inciting his supporters to commit some type of an insurrection. Now, you might be asking like, well, who cares? Isn't this what they always do? Yes, it is, but this is one of the beautiful things that can happen in a big trial like this. And when there's some type of contest, some type of battle, is that you get to see how fair the actors in that battle fight each other. We're kind of seeing like a Game of Thronesian trial by combat situation happening. People looking on get to see whether or not the fight happened honorably or not. Now, I suspect, given everything else that we've seen thus far, because remember, every time something happens like this, there's more and more patriots woken up, more and more patriots. As the deep state boot comes down, there are patriots rising to push it off the chest of the freedom-loving people of the world. And I think that Trump and the Patriots, the team, knew exactly what was going to be happening here. I think that they knew that the deep state was going to try to do everything they could to discredit Trump. It wasn't just about getting him out of office. They had to destroy his image. They had to destroy everything that he represented, because at a deep, deep level, the way the machinations work is they have to sell people on the idea that what they're doing is good. And as Google whistleblower Zach Voorhees shared, part of the way this works is you have to present a well-coordinated lie. So this is an experiment that they've done in various psychology circles, and it was also cited apparently by Google's paperwork, if I'm remembering correctly. Imagine you have somebody, you want to convince them that something they would otherwise understand to be true is a lie and they should go along with the lie. But let's say I have two people come into a room. One of them is clearly taller than the other person, maybe like 3-4 inches, like not a huge margin, but enough for anybody with any sense who could clearly see who the taller person is. You take that person and then you have 6 other people, and the person who comes in, the subject, is told that they have to try to figure out who the taller person is. Everybody else in the study is an actor. They're pretending to be there just like our subject is. The test taker asks the subject, who's the taller person? They ask all 6 of the people first, all of the plants, right? And they say, who's the taller person? And everybody chooses the clearly shorter person, which would totally go against common sense, right? By the time you get to the 7th person, who's the actual victim in this case, the subject of the experiment, and that's basically the way it works. That's why they need total coordination at a massive level between government, between big tech, between big media, between movies, between education. I mean, you name it. They need all these voices all singing the same lie at once, because most people would rather accept a lie pushed by the herd than stand out of the herd to speak to the truth and their integrity and their principles. One, if the person has a lot of personal convictions and tends to be more spiritual, then they will stand out of the crowd because they'd rather be the William Wallace, they'd rather be the patriot, they'd rather be the freedom fighter than go along with something they believe to be untrue. That's very interesting. The other thing is that all it takes is one of those other contestants in the experiment to state the right answer, for that subject to now be like, well, wait a minute, yeah, clearly this is the right answer. So that's why it's so important to squash dissenting opinion. That's why somebody like Trump was a massive disruption to their plans. I think that piece of evidence alone deals a major blow to this idea that somehow Trump is just another deep state actor, and all of this that's been happening, including our friend, is just part of some agenda to pacify us. No, I'm sorry. This is my personal opinion. I think that's definitely not the case. Now, could I be wrong? Maybe. I'm not omniscient. I don't know everything. But I try to vet out all these things using some critical thinking, reason, and logic. And if an argument of truth is valid, it should not just apply here, absent these facts. It should be able to incorporate all these facts. That's what conceptual coherence is, which we will be talking about at some point. So the really good news out of the story is that the deep state media in Congress who pushed this idea that Trump is a part of some insurrection had their lie completely destroyed. Now, they still control the media apparatus, so there's probably a lot of Americans who didn't actually see the truth, but that's where you come in. That's where we come in. Through word of mouth, we can talk about these things, and now we get to be that other subject in the experiment that clearly points out the lie. And now they say, well, wait a minute. Yeah, you're right. Like, why is it that if there was this big threat of an insurrection that the mayor of DC decided they didn't want the National Guard in? And a bunch of other lies. There's actually a really great video I'll try to find and put in the description showing all of the fabrications that happened on the 6th between John Sullivan, between police officers kind of like ushering people in, moving the barricades, all sorts of things that happened on the 6th. That lie is thoroughly dissolving before the American public's eyes. And what you see on the other side of it are these corrupt politicians and these lying media people that are pushing fake news like crazy, and more people are waking up every passing day. Now, in closing, I can't say for certain when moves will be made by the alliance who have the evidence in hand to actually take action and do something. But it should prove to all of you that the corruption is real and treasonous. It is the right of the people to alter or abolish their government and to institute a new one when it is necessary. What do? Well, we need not sit on our hands. For those of you who love to tell me that I'm just pacifying people by suggesting that there may be some group of people, loyalists, true Christians, true law-abiding citizens, then in the government and the military that actually want to do something about this, that's not the case. We have the power to do something right here and now. We have the power to learn the law. We have the power to use our critical thinking, sharpen our critical thinking skills in the information that's pouring out every day between election fraud, between the COVID conspiracy, between the impeachment scandal that just happened, and likely other things that will come about as the weeks and months proceed on. To get a head start on your re-education of a truly free and just government, see the link below to a book called Maxims of Divine Law. In this book, you'll find a ton of awesome information that gives you the keys to really see and understand, to give you the eyes to see corruption and what a true just government, law, and legal system looks like. Now, don't forget to head over to stillnessinthestorm.com to show your support and appreciation for this video. Please also share this video on your networks that you feel called. We're being censored and shadow banned like crazy. And if it wasn't for people sharing this content, I don't know if it'd get into the hands of anybody. And also don't forget, as much as it's useful, I don't even know if it is, but please subscribe and hit the notification bell. This is Justin signing off here. And remember, the light of hope is always within reach. Freedom and prosperity are our destiny if we're willing to fight for it.